This episode is brought to you by our sponsor, Artery Inc. They are an anatomy and healthcare-inspired apparel company right here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, with a wide variety of human body-inspired designs, with numerous clothing choices for the healthcare worker or anatomy enthusiast in your life. Maybe that's you. If so, go over to www.arteryinc, that's INK.com, to browse their selection and use promo code LISTEN2PHP to save 10% on orders over $35 and show your support for the show, as well as for this awesome company. Please note that does not apply to their subscription boxes. Let's get to the show. This podcast is for informational purposes only. It is not intended to provide medical advice. It exists only to entertain. 1860s London Street. A well-dressed man is walking quickly down a sidewalk when he is approached by two paupers.
Oh, bother. I'm going to be late for the Sotheby's auction. Oh, I say, sir, what's the meaning of this? You're sprawled all over the street. I almost got mud on my jacket.
Oh, begging your pardon, Governor. I've not been feeling well lately, I must admit.
Well, that's no excuse for waylaying your betters. I say, is that blood all over your hand?
It sure is, I believe. Although it's the least of my worries, what with me being out of work. Can't barely keep all my victuals down.
Well, it's quite obvious you have consumption.
All right you are, most likely. I hadn't thought of that. I've tried inhaling some tar vapor, but that doesn't seem to help like the corner here said it would.
No use, my good man. Unfortunately, it's probably just owing to your poor constitution. Some of us are just not made to be healthy, while others of us can fight it off thanks to our good breeding.
Pardon me, Governor. I couldn't help it over here. Is that the theory, then? Consumption's down to breeding, isn't it?
Oh, what else would it be? Why, my very own sister. She managed to fight off the devilish condition with nothing more than a sail to Spain.
Oh, well, Spain sounds nice. Nice and warm there, I suspect.
Ah, so she was feeling ill, but was able to take a nice sail, then?
Well, yes. She is strong in mind and body and born gifted, so naturally she improved mightily. I mean, she is a woman, so she couldn't sail the boat herself, of course. There was a whole crew.
I'm sure it had nothing to do with the fact that she could rest whenever she wanted and live a life of leisure instead of working long hours 7 days a week in the polluted factory. Of course she had no family with her to raise.
Oh, naturally.
Well, they did get me cut back to only 10 hours at the plant after I got sick. And my 10 kids are looking after me when I'm home. That's almost as good as a sail to Spain, I'd say.
Well, I assume many of your family are sick as well. You assuredly passed your weak constitution on to them. No offense meant, of course, good sir.
That certainly makes a fair bit of sense, being that there's no reasonable explanation as to why anyone would be ill here in bonny old London other than poor breeding and a weak constitution.
That's exactly right.
Well, your sister's doing well, then.
Oh, certainly. She's the center of attention at all the balls. What with her new slim figure and rosy cheeks, sometimes she looks positively feverish. So she's taken up with dancing. Often has to rest, but she's the envy of all.
Well, thank goodness for that. Do you have any suggestions other than a sail to Spain? That might be a stretch.
Oh, they say horseback riding or bathing in the sea are also worth a try.
Oh, those sound just delightful. I don't suppose you have a spare horse on you, or maybe a cottage by the sea I could use. I'm sorry about that. I got a little bit of me bloody cough on your fine suit there. It'll come right out, I assure you.
Well, sadly, fresh out of free horses and vacation houses, I'm afraid. We've fallen on harder times. I've had to let the second butler go from our summer castle.
Have you tried, opium?
Oh, that's an excellent idea. That sounds like something I could get my hands on.
I'm sure you have no idea what you're talking about. I'll be on my way now. Good luck to you both. Hopefully things will turn out for you.
Oh, I'm sure it'll turn out. Maybe I'll be the envy of the ball myself someday.
No, probably not.
No, you're right.
Throughout history, this is facts and there might be. You gotta listen, you don't have to read. For historians,
Welcome, everyone. This is Poor Historians, the podcast delving into the archives of medical history. As three emergency physicians, we will explore the unusual ailments, treatments, physicians, and all related material having to do with the healing arts. I'm Max, and I'm joined here by my good friends and colleagues, Aaron and Mike. Gentlemen, what's your favorite part of spring now that the weather's warmed up?
Oh man, I tried to wear flip-flops yesterday, which I love. It's great, like
With or without socks?
without, of course.
You can't wear flip-flops with socks unless you've got like a toe sock.
Okay.
Yeah, that's too no. Plus, it's just weird. But
They'll just flip right off. Did you know in Australia they call flip-flops thongs?
Yeah, I've heard that.
I mean,
Or
I've heard
maybe
that
in
term
Europe
before.
too.
I failed though. It was like 40 degrees by the end of the night. It was so
Yeah.
cold. I was like literally shivering. It's like, damn it.
Yeah, it's still
Didn't
trying to
work.
sort out what exactly the weather wants to do here.
Mhm. I like all the dandelions
Yeah, they're all in my
in
yard
my
right now.
Yep.
Yep.
Mhm. You probably look at your neighbors' yards and none of them have dandelions, just you. And you feel like a schmuck.
No, it's no mow May. We're supposed to let the dandelions
Thank
live
you.
for
Oh,
the
really?
pollinators. Yeah.
Yep.
Oh,
Yes.
good.
That's
I'm
what we're
glad
doing.
that I haven't
You're-
treated mine.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
no,
yeah.
absolutely. And it's also the season where bunnies are all over the place. And so today we let our dogs out, and to our horror, one of them had a baby bunny in its mouth.
No.
But everybody, it's okay. I yelled at the dog. It dropped the bunny, which ran off apparently unharmed. So crisis averted.
Wait, it ran? It must have looked unsettling. It didn't
What's that?
hop? I've never seen a running bunny.
We'll say it bounded.
Okay.
Anyway. All right, we got some shout outs here. We got a shout out.
Yeah. Some of the details of this episode and a deep dive are available in a book called Consumptive Chic, A History of Beauty, Fashion, and Disease. That's by a Dr. Carolyn Day, who is a professor at Furman University in South Carolina. Furman University looks kind of expensive, but you know that's they all are these days. The book is great. Give it a look up on the Amazon place or wherever you actually bookstore or your local bookstore would be great as well. So
They still have those
Let's
nowadays,
acknowledge
don't they?
yeah. The one in our village is open from like 10 to 2 Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. It's just
Still counts.
eking out a
Still
living.
counts.
Eking out a living.
We've got this place actually in our neighborhood. It's pretty cool. You go there, they give them your driver's license or some form of identification, and then they give you this card. And then if you just go back there, they will let you take a book for like a couple weeks, and then you just
That is
return
cool.
it. And so yeah,
It's crazy.
got one.
I
Yeah.
think I've heard of that.
A library?
Yeah.
library. Yep, exactly. That's what it's called. Yeah, it must be a chain. Anywho. We do actually have a fun Mike's mailbag question. So that is, of course, our new segment where we take a medical history question. We pose it to my colleague here, Mike, and we see if he knows the answer off the top of his head. What is your record so far? 0-4?
Oh, and 2 as far as I
Rude.
know.
It's the O
I was
part
pretty
that's
damn
important.
close with the.
He
Starting
has
off
gotten a
strong.
little closer than I would have given him credit for. And so this week we have a submission for a listener and fan named Camille. And he asks the following question. When was the first hyperbaric chamber used in medicine? So what do
When
you
or
think?
where?
When?
It was 19. I'm trying to get the specific. Yeah, it was October of 1946. James Oppenheimer was working on the atom bomb. And while they're trying to isolate vibranium for the device, they noticed that they had to do it in a vacuum, and so this hyperbaric chamber was the opposite of a vacuum. so
they turned the switch the other direction.
yeah, and then somebody was in there that had a necrotizing infection of their leg. His name was James Sotheby, and turned out that the wound healed a lot faster than they thought it was going to,
Because
So
of the
then
reverse
therefore-
vacuum.
hyperbaric medicine was invented. in
Wow.
October of 1946 by James Oppenheimer.
My favorite answer ever.
I mean, if you're going to be wrong, you might as well be spectacularly wrong. And you are spectacularly wrong, which means for any new listeners to the segment that our submission person, Camille, is going to get his own eponym, which is, his name in medicine. So we'll get to that in a second. But the answer to this actually surprised me quite a bit. Aaron, do you want to take a stab at what year you think the first hyperbaric chamber was created?
But it's earlier than that.
It is
I'm gonna
earlier
go
than that.
1897.
1662.
What?
That's
It's
insane.
kind of what I said. So, a British physician, Nathaniel Henshaw, apparently made a hyperbaric chamber. Now, this is well before they isolated oxygen as a pure thing. So, hyperbaric medicine nowadays is a chamber that they can pressurize with very high levels, like 100% of oxygen, to do things like wound healing and treat carbon monoxide injury and dive injuries and that sort of thing. But back then, he basically made this pressurized chamber, and I could not find a lot of details on how exactly it was made, but they could pressurize air, put somebody in it. And the second thing I wanted to know is why did they do any of that? And they just thought it might have good health benefits to be in a high pressure environment.
Like an orgone chamber.
Except that it actually did something.
Yeah,
I'm sure
so
they
yeah,
probably made it
but-
out of mutton and bones.
So, and it took in 1878, Paul Burt, who is considered the quote father of hyperbaric physiology, documented a bunch of toxic effects with like hyperbaric oxygen if unregulated. So at that point, they could actually use 100% oxygen, and he found that it may have some benefits, but if you put humans and animals in it for too long, you might cause them to seize. And so over the successive years, we sort of refined this process quite a bit. And
Did you
I would have never guessed 1662 was the first
run
time.
into
that's
the story
nuts.
of the Brooklyn Bridge? I think this might be an episode.
Yeah,
because
we can definitely I did run into references to that, and what Aaron's talking about is when they built the Brooklyn Bridge, driving the pylons into the riverbed of whatever river that is. Is it Brooklyn
East
River? I don't know.
River? I don't
East
know.
River, sure, East River.
The Brooklyn River,
Been
right?
to New York twice. I have no
look,
idea.
It's the New York River. That's-
But
United
they
States
had
of
to go
America
down so
River.
deep into the water, and this was an early time. Was it like turn of the 20th century? And a lot of the workers got the bends or like a decompression sickness from being down in such a highly pressurized environment and then coming straight to the surface. So it's actually a pretty cool deep dive. We could definitely do an episode on that, I would think. But there you go. So that means, Camille, you stumped Mike. He did not know the correct answer, although he did try. And so we are going to grant you your own eponym, your own.
He flipped the switch.
Well,
And
flip
reversed the
switch.
vacuum.
Reverse
went off the
vacuum.
rails as soon as the vibranium came up. I was
So
like,
I don't know if you guys have ever heard this one when you were reading your medical textbooks, but there is a physical exam maneuver called the Camilles Clutch. And this is where the physician has a patient lay prone, so on their stomach, and you stand over the back facing towards their head, and you wrap both your hands under their chin. You sit on their lower back, and you just kind of exaggerate the extension of their lumbar spine. Get their arms over your knees, and then if the patient has back pain with this maneuver and he taps out, it is diagnostic that he is a certified jabroni. And you win the match.
What's that move called, though? I mean, I know it's Camille's Clutch. That's the medical one, but what's the layperson's?
I believe Camille's Clutch predates it, but there was a wrestler, the Iron Chic, if you're familiar. He had the Camel's Clutch.
That's what, okay.
Yeah, so, but this has nothing to do with that.
Did there.
Explaining the jokes always makes them better. I should just leave that
a good
reference out there.
segment. A good segment of our listeners probably laughed a lot sooner than Mike and I did. So
I
that's
don't know
good.
if it's a good segment, but it's a segment. There's a non-zero segment that did. All right. Well, we're through the business of the show. Let's get to the meat. So it looks like Aaron wants to talk about a deadly infectious disease and how it influenced fashion trends.
Let's get to the
Yeah, that's
mutton.
right.
Interesting.
Yeah. No,
Get to the
this
mutton.
will be good. We'll see how this goes since we're re-recording, man.
Oh yes, and this is the
once.
re-recording from the
We'll
episode
try.
that
We'll try.
vanished and is gone. So
Yeah.
this is polished.
Into the ether. Yeah, you'll be amazed at how polished it is. Anyway, tuberculosis, or TB, is an ancient disease that has been with us from the very start. It has been found in Peruvian mummies, Egyptian mummies, other burial sites that are almost 10,000 years old, at least in DNA form. And it's still, today, the single deadliest infectious disease, killing almost 1.5 million people a year. Back on top this year, after COVID played the part of Leicester City in 2020.
I don't get your soccer references,
So
but
it's funny because this is the second time and I still don't understand.
You guys didn't Google. You didn't
we
Google.
did not look that one up, but
That's okay.
I like to point
Well,
out that we're off to a hell of a start for our humor podcast with one of the world's deadliest diseases. Go ahead, Aaron.
Yep, just that's how we roll. It has infected about a quarter of the world's population, which is a fun thing to just kind of wrap your mind around.
It's a lot of people.
Yeah.
Is that ever or is that currently?
I think it's currently. It's
Citation on that.
Well, in the show notes,
You
I
can't
don't-
say
it's-
internet.
No. The WHO has a pretty
They
significant
put a poll out on
pamphlet
Facebook.
there. Yeah, which I think we will link in the show notes. It's at the bottom of the document.
There's 2 billion people.
Yeah.
There's 2 billion people.
Yeah, well, maybe, I don't know. I say stuff and I did look it up, to be honest, but who knows? It
2
boggles my
billion.
mind. I still kind of wonder about
Backing
that
off
fact.
your
I am
off your
backing
assertion.
off.
Come on.
Yes.
When I
Stand
tell you
tall.
just the gravity of what you just said,
you
Wrap
did
your head
simple
around
math. Simple
2
math.
billion with a B.
I mean, so we'll come back to it at the end, just to cause some existential dread, and we'll have some links for more reading. But forget all that. What we really want to know is, how did TB affect Victorian England, which I think we've established is one of our favorite eras. In this case, because Victorian England was nutty enough to take the symptoms of this disease and essentially proclaim it sexy as hell, while everyone first tried to figure out what it was and then tried to figure out what to do about it. So that was kind of the background of
It's
trying
all
to
about
figure out what it
framing.
was.
It's all
It is.
about framing.
I'm dead sexy.
That's right. So let's do a bit of background. Keeping in mind, in the U.S. as a modern ED doc, I've seen probably fewer than 5 cases of TB. If you're listening or you have a background in global medicine, feel free to point out stuff I get wrong for a future shout out.
We definitely talked about this when we first recorded this, but we were saying I think I've seen 2 cases or 3 cases in my career, and you
Yeah.
guys are about the same, right? That's
Yeah.
How
I had one really, really sick guy that they told me later after. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's
It's
how it
always
goes.
after the fact, 'cause you never
They're
know.
like, hey, you know that really sick guy? Yeah, he had TB.
Yeah,
were
well,
you
then-
around him a lot? Like,
Yeah. Or you get the chest x-ray, you're like,
Yeah, the chest X-ray looks bad. It looks like something's very
put
wrong.
him in a different room.
you start to sweat, and you're like,
Yeah,
mm.
I said my anecdote about this is when I was many years ago. I think I was actually in residency. I had a patient who was there for like this upper respiratory infection, very very underwhelming, like coughing, cold symptoms, totally normal vitals, looked fine actually. Said that they felt otherwise fine, and so I'm kind of okay. I guess we'll do a chest X-ray as you're here, and then I'm walking to go to the door, and they do what we call in the business a doorknob question, which means you're about to leave the room, and you get the question as to why they're really there. And after I had gone through my 15-minute history and physical, the person said, Doc, got one other question for you. Is it true that once you have tuberculosis, you can't get it again?
You're
Which
like,
I paused. I mean,
no.
why do you say
Why
that?
do you ask?
Oh, I had tuberculosis once. Did you take your 12 or 9 weeks of antibiotics?
9 months.
I think so. 9 months. Yeah, 9 months of antibiotics. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, we're gonna get that chest X-ray, and what do you know? Active TB.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you without a mask, sir.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah,
So TB typically caused by Mycobacterium tuberculosis, which is a bacterium. It's a group of about 7 or 8 closely related bacteria, all of which generally cause similar disease. It's really slow. Some bacteria replicate in about 20 minutes. TB takes almost a day, and it needs lots of oxygen, and its cell wall is basically solid fat.
no
And
body shaming.
It doesn't like to move. I'm just stating facts. I mean, these are just facts. And because of all these factors, it tends to set up in the lungs because it can get everything it needs without doing too much work. We're essentially the only victim of this disease. There are some forms that get into livestock, but then it's usually from us and back to us and so on. It's us that it likes.
It's all about us.
Yeah, it is. It's able to trick the immune system into bringing it lunch instead of killing it once it's absorbed.
Wait. What does TB serve for lunch? Caseating granuloma crackers?
Yeah. Well, yeah, you got to get a soft cheese, the caseating, to spread on the crackers. Anyway.
Caseating means cheesy, like.
Yeah. Which I think. Anyway. Yeah. So it uses some tricks, and the body has a very hard time killing it. So instead, we make giant cavitary lesions and clumps of cells and gunk. It's called a granuloma.
Cheesy granulomas.
Yeah,
They
really
look
big.
like cheese.
Yeah. Well, caseating necrosis is the kind of the way
so
the
dead
cells
cheese.
die. Yeah. They get really big. So yeah, it goes for the upper lungs because that's where the oxygen is richest. It's just lazy. I lost a lot of respect. Laziest bacterial disease I've ever heard of. E. coli, meanwhile, has to claw its way up the urethra, and the TB is just sitting there in the lung. Just kidding.
Do-
TB.
Do you have more respect for miliary TB? Because that's the TB
'Cause
when
it
it's
goes
like
everywhere?
all throughout the body.
Yeah.
It's like actually very active. Is that
Yes. Those are the go-getters of the TB world.
Would that
They're
be
the
more
rise and grind ones? They're like,
more
we
a
gotta
product
get
of the
all over 'em."
host? Like that host can really efficiently use oxygen?
Yeah, maybe it's not the bacterium's fault. Maybe it's the host fault. You ever think about that, Aaron?
No. I don't think you should blame the victim here.
You're blaming the bacteria. You're blaming the contagion.
Yeah, the perpetrator of the problem.
All it's trying to do is exist.
Thank you.
Anyway, a relatively high percentage of people don't even develop active disease if they are infected. So 90% of people who have normal immune systems control the bacterium after infection and develop no symptoms, which I think is where the 2 billion comes in. And although it's definitely contagious, it takes a fair amount of exposure to catch it, which is not to say it's not a problem or safe or that you should not worry about being exposed. It's more like just a picture of an iceberg where most of it's below the water, and then you see, a huge number of people are infected but not sick, and even when they are, it takes weeks before they start to show symptoms. So the ill folks are just what you see in the rest of it.
But what I need to know is how
Bad
far
metaphor.
away do I have to stand from somebody, and how long can I speak with them without worrying? Because this is something that is like very,
Yeah,
basic.
I mean, we do right now. We put people in negative pressure rooms when we're worried about TB, and we wear N95 masks. Which
That's where
I'm
the
sure
vacuum
everyone
is
now.
got the switch in the normal position. It sucks the air out of the room. It's the
Yep, and
reverse
then just-
hyperbaric chamber.
And then when
Yep,
you want to
so-
treat them, you just flip it again, and then you pressurize the room and put all the good oxygen in their body. Wait, not
Yeah.
for these guys, no.
Oh yeah.
No,
You've been
because
doing it
then
wrong
it would
this whole
blow
time?
the
Bad.
bacterium into the rest of the hospital. No, that would be quite bad. No. Yeah. So I did not see a specific number about exact timing, but usually I would have to say hours, I think, of direct exposure before you start to get a significant increased risk. I don't think that's worth testing.
Well, and there's the interesting, you've said it, but just to summarize, this is an interesting illness because it will sort of go dormant when your immune system can keep it at bay, and it just sits in these granulomas, these inflammatory tissues, and it may never bother you again, but there's also a chance that as you get older and maybe your immune system itself
Changes,
gets weaker and whatnot, then the tuberculosis can become active again. At that point, you are contagious.
Yeah.
And so it's just it could
It's
wait
complicated,
decades before it does that again.
Slow bacterium, slow disease. So initial illness is usually weeks, and then what's called a quote post-primary phase, as Max said, can last for years outside of what was called galloping consumption in the Victorian era. Sometimes it'll go really quickly.
They loved horses back
They
then.
did. They really
everything.
did.
There was
Yeah.
gallops in the heart, galloping pneumonia.
Yep. Outside of other infections like HIV, which is going to change it quite a bit. And primarily this is a long losing battle. So the body and the bacteria fight, and it's not really a fair fight. You can kill it with antibiotics these days, but it takes 4 of them if you're lucky and it's susceptible, and the treatment goes on for literally months, and you can't miss a dose.
Yeah, it's like
It's a
9 months,
mess.
isn't it?
Yeah, it's something
I prescribe often.
Yeah, not a medical advice podcast, but yeah, I didn't look that up. Anyway, yes, long.
I'm not
long
advising
times.
our listeners to prescribe antibiotics to anybody.
I know that's what people just say when they don't want to actually say they
Okay.
don't know.
You got nervous?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. People are intermittently contagious early on, and then they devolve as they get sicker into this classic picture of weight loss, what's called cachexia. So they just lose a fair amount of their muscle mass and start to look very ill. Night sweats, bloody cough. Hollywood loves a bloody cough.
It's 100% like you have a character in Hollywood
Yep.
that develops a cough and a bloody cough. They are going to be actively dying through the storyline.
Yep. Yeah,
Always.
That's how you know. Most of those consequences have to do with the destruction of the lungs. But because it is incompletely cleared and can travel through the bloodstream, it can set up and cause granulomas all over, which is what Max referred to with miliary TB, which is when it goes all over. So it can go to the spine and joints and all. That's what all over means. So,
Cheesy granulomas too.
yep, all over the place. It's rare in rich countries, so we don't see it as much, and thus we don't care about it as much as we should in general. But
Because we treat it with money?
yeah, that's
How
a
much
good
is it going to
question.
take for you to go away? You got a 10 spot here.
Yeah, no, it's probably a combination of a lot of things, right? Better sanitation, better living conditions, and we don't even know exactly why it went away when it was more prevalent before.
Well,
like,
think about
specifically. So.
Think about our country now. We got some city centers, right, that are densely populated, but it'd be really tough. Oh, no, again, infectious diseases can move fairly quickly, but we're spread. So we don't have public transit. We have to use cars, but we're also not likely to get tuberculosis from somebody across town.
Right. Well, and this is
There's a
where we
benefit.
see it still in the U.S. is certainly in city centers and among at-risk populations who are having a hard time. But yeah, so
Jail.
yeah,
Don't go to jail, kids.
incarceration
You're gonna
is
get TB.
poor.
Mhm,
Yep.
Homeless and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yep. Global health still cares. And the World Health Organization still cares, and that's good. But there is a whole historical era heavily influenced by tuberculosis, which is 19th century England. As we've covered, pretty much our whole podcast is just a bunch of heinous crap in those days that could kill you.
I was like, are you saying
in
our
all sorts of
podcast is
ways.
heinous crap? I think it's halfway decent,
No,
man.
it's-
You're
yeah,
referring
so I
to
guess-
19th century England
Yeah.
social norms.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
But tuberculosis captured the imagination of the populace in a way few other diseases can rival. I mean, starting in the 17th century, people noticed that TB was more and more prevalent, and they took to calling it consumption because it does literally consume patients. People can't keep up nutritionally, and they lose weight to a staggering degree. And then also in the early 1800s, there was a mandate from Parliament to track vital statistics such as mortality rates and cause of death and so on. So this led to a lot of people writing about TB and noticing it, and estimates came out that the disease accounted for anywhere from a fifth to a third of deaths at the time, probably heightening its fame. It was the
We
most
reminded, did
famous
you guys
disease.
see the movie Tombstone?
Mhm.
Yeah,
That was really good.
yeah. That's a great anecdote. Why do
Didn't,
you mention it? Right? Why do you mention it?
Was it Doc Holliday? Did he have TB?
Mm-hmm.
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, that was a little bit of a spin on the Hollywood because he would cough up the blood, but then he killed a bunch of other people too. So, like,
And then they would cough up blood.
yeah, from a different
Oh,
reason.
he gave him TB, 2 bullets.
Look at that. Ba-dum-tsh. TB also coincided with our old friend Theophile Hyacinth Linnaeus' invention of the stethoscope. I can't say that guy's name without laughing. Which did allow.
It's Ted lover. Well, now he could be like a TED Talk lover. He's a Theophile.
Yeah. Oh, it's pretty good.
Is it though?
Yeah, I mean, come on.
Hey,
Theo,
Max, you know
Ted,
what? You
that's-
laughed.
that's
You
pretty
muted your
good.
mic. Everybody saw that.
We all saw it. So anyway, he invented the stethoscope, which allowed a significant extension of the physical exam, especially of the lungs, where there were numerous findings in TB patients. So it was like
Man,
a
you know what?
cornucopia of fun stuff to listen to.
Whatever. You don't need a stethoscope to hear the sputum is bloody. Just freaking look at it.
No, it's
It's
true.
an overrated invention.
Yeah.
You have to look at your stethoscope to see the blood.
Yep.
Oh, crikey, there's blood all over my stethoscope.
I think my record for seeing patients without remembering that I forgot my stethoscope that day is 7 or 8.
In a row?
Yeah,
Yeah,
don't
but
worry.
would you
Actually,
spin
don't
around
put
like a
it
pair of nunchucks then?
I think that's why my stethoscope's broken because I basically just walk around swinging it all the time.
I think it was okay, I'm not going to say it. But you,
Let's leave that one to the mystery of.
you should just leave
Listener's
the stethoscope around your neck and then put it to the chest. Because it's a useless physical exam finding now.
Yeah.
You're wheezing? No? Okay. I'll take your word for it.
In combination with growing anatomist studies, which we've also covered in this era, there was a whole cottage industry of TB prognostication and guesswork, including new names for types of dead tissue. So the caseating necrosis, we've already talked about a few times, is a description of the dead tissue in the body that looks like cheese.
Does
which
smell
was
like cheese a
common
little bit.
finding. Yeah, does it?
How would he know, Max? You said he saw
He walks around
less than
smelling.
5 people with TB. Yeah.
Yeah, but other things are caseating. Like
Mhm.
they have like caseating cysts and things like that.
Yeah, caseating pus. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it was so common, many experts had a lot to say about it. Always good for fun with an infectious agent before germ theory. So the Victorian English related TB to what they called, quote, constitutional factors, which was really just cover for class-based or inherited theory. You're sick because you're inferior, was what the thinking was. Seemed to be most prevalent in England and Northern Europe, while TB was regarded as more infectious in the South. So I don't know what that says about Northern Europe. Perhaps because it was slow and some percentage cleared the disease even when infected, people looked for, or controlled it. People looked for explanations other than contagion. As early as 1806, the Dr. John Reed said, quote, The destroying angel, while requiring general retribution for certain deviations from nature, marks particular individuals for primary sacrifice. So
I would read the hell out of medical journals if they were written like that.
They were at the time. They're
that
all
is
great.
poetry.
Yeah.
And I also was like super excited because I wanted to dibs the name Destroying Angel for my metal band, but I looked it up and there's already a metal band named Destroying Angel out of Missouri.
They
Pretty
scooped
brutal.
you. We should go. We should go on a road trip.
Yeah, he's
Check them out.
great
TB
idea.
is like Thanos. It's like the big bad.
Yeah, it was. Yes, and I mean, less than half. But yeah, this was reinforced with cases like the Bronte family. So Emily Bronte, who penned the famous Wuthering Heights, her only novel, sadly, which was published to great acclaim in 1847, was one of the younger sisters of that family. It was a big deal at the time. Apparently, the book was so passionate. I guess everyone thought a man wrote it at first. Women weren't passionate. I guess
If anyone was known for passionate expressions of feelings, it was definitely Victorian
British
English men.
Yes, her whole family died of TB, and rather than look at the fact that they all drank water that drained out of a church graveyard next door, or that TB might be contagious, everyone thought, oh, well, she was quiet, shy, and retiring, and obviously didn't have a strong constitution.
So the whole family
She
died of
probably
TB.
got that from her family.
And it comes from church graveyard water?
I don't know if that's related or not. I'm just saying they ignored other possible
Oh, I
causes.
see.
I think the church graveyard water, amazingly, is just kind of a red herring. I don't think the TB was
Probably
in
not
the
good.
church graveyard
No.
water. But, I'm not thinking that's the cleanest.
Artisanal? Would you call it artisanal?
I don't know if that's what it means.
But people drank mummy water before. I guess these
Yeah.
aren't preserved bodies.
That's true. Yeah, right. We back call
So
out
this
to
is
our,
like,
our mummy
Instead
medicine.
of the really good stuff with the 5,000-year-old mummy water, you get the
Oh, honey.
the first runoff. So it's like your quick Jim
Stanley
Beam
water
versus your fine aged Scotch. Yeah.
So they had a lot of prescriptions to strengthen the Constitution. And these were probably pretty good for people at the time because you couldn't cure it anyway. And medicine at that time was mostly, bleeding and making you have diarrhea. So
Actually, Aaron, everybody knows that if you have an amulet of healing, it does raise your constitution. So if you would play some more Dungeons and Dragons, you would
What's
know
an
these
amulet?
an
things. It's
amulet
like a wearable charm. It's like a necklace type charm.
Yep. That's a good point.
Amulet of
That's a good point. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So fair. But anyway, so maybe it was an amulet of healing. Sea bathing was popular. Horseback riding was popular for hundreds of years. Thomas Sydenham popularized horseback riding for TB in the 1600s. Some of us might recognize that name.
Mike does.
Yes. Sydenham's Korea.
Yeah.
Not,
Yeah.
CH Korea.
Yeah.
Like
Not
unusual
country.
movement.
Chorea, right?
Is it athetosis? Is that
Yeah, I think so.
Is that used for that, like,
Chorioathetotic.
Oh, yeah. Chorioathetosis.
Yeah, which
Yeah,
is a
basically
kind
these-
of movement, right? Which is
Like,
I
they look
forget
like
the
TikTok
exact-
dances.
They do
Yeah,
a sort of involuntary kind of jerking
Yep.
moves. Kind of like the inflatable guys outside of the used car lots, right? Isn't it kind of like that?
No,
Or
I
no?
think now, honestly, if you look, you might not see this, Max, where you live, but like in areas where there are teenage kids that go out and do things, like you'll see, go to a Subway and watch if there's a teenage girl there, they will be doing this.
I'm not
They will
going
not
to
be able
Subway to
to
watch
stop.
teenage girls do things, Mike.
No, I'm just saying. God, it used to be like the little boys would
God,
do the
man.
Fortnite dances, and now they
It's not getting
can't
better.
stop. They can't stop. They have chorioathetosis. They cannot stop.
The younger generation,
You're not going to be able to see it now.
constant motion.
They're either
Fair.
either perfectly silent and immobile on their phone, or they're doing stupid ass TikTok dances. There's nothing in between. Yes, that is an absolute, and yes, I understand what that means.
All right. So
Only Sith deal in absolutes.
Wow, we swang through a lot of territory there. Anything that was stimulating but not overtaxing. So swinging on a swing, which required little exertion, or sailing, that was often prescribed. Some rich folks did take off on sailboats to Spain. Climate.
Only to Spain?
Well,
I'm picturing
no,
like
not-
what
not
about
only
Bob?
the
Where he's
south of
tied to the
France.
mast.
It's a great call out.
I could sail. I could sail now. I'm a sailor.
Yeah, that's right. I love that movie. So there were examples like Dr. James Clark, who in the early 1800s moved to the South of France and eventually set up a clinic in Rome for English people looking to get healthy.
Rome,
and led
France?
what's that?
Rome, France, or Rome, Italy?
Rome, Italy. Yeah. No, he took off for
Went to
warmer
far south France, then.
climes. Yeah. Well, they're not too far away from each other, right?
Anyway.
Max
Anyway.
doesn't know.
Well, this is a
He's
whole
not very good at
sanitarium,
geography.
a whole sanatorium movement where specific hospitals or retreats were made in warm climates to help people recover. That I think could be like TB part 2, because the sanitarium movement is interesting and a big topic. Helped grow the hospital movement and was a look into class differences as well, because pauper sanatoriums were a little bit different from those in the south of France.
I mean, the sanatorium movement was just impressive to see that they
Yeah.
would just move an entire sanitarium from one place to another, as
Yeah.
opposed to just building a new one.
Did they?
Boo.
Interesting.
Sanatorium movement.
Boo.
What?
Continue,
Okay.
Aaron.
Yeah, that's fun. Shout out to Arizona, where Tucson was so popular as a sanatorium destination in the U.S. during the height of TB that people ended up calling a big tent city of TB patients outside the city a sanitarium, in quotes, but because they filled up all the ones in the city. So I don't know if that was ideal either.
It's checking all the boxes, though. Fresh air.
Yeah, you got a lot of fresh air.
Mhm.
Yeah. In addition to steps to improve the patient's constitution, whatever that is, there are any number of direct therapies. So there was a quote unquote consumptive diet, which included large amounts of fat, which was called suet in the Victorian era, especially usually from a specific animal, because when they said the diets, we all know the best suet is mutton suet.
Have you seen a picture of that stuff? I looked up a picture of it.
No, I don't want it to. It's probably
It's
really
about as appetizing as it sounds.
as it sounds. Mutton suet, that sounds so
It's a
good.
firm glob of animal fat.
Yes. Ass's milk was very popular for some reason.
Is there any other way you could have phrased that, English major, Aaron?
Yeah,
No,
Hershey squirts.
No. Ass milk is the best milk. That's ass's milk. Like an
I'm gonna
ass, like
take
a
that
combo
phrase
of a
and it's gonna be part
donkey
of a
and a
promo.
horse. That's an ass.
That's true. It's true. I mean, just saying.
They tried all sorts of medicines. Arsenic and mercury, used
Not
less.
really medicines.
Yeah, no, used less frequently. Quinine was a big one, an alkaloid made from cinchona trees, which is still helpful against malaria. Digitalis or foxglove, we talked about that somewhat.
But I just,
Made a nice
I don't
tea.
know what so it would be that this is available, right? But was there any thought behind it?
Yeah, so both of the quinine and the digitalis, quote unquote, helped by either slowing the heart down because the heart would go rapidly when people were sick, or stopping fevers because the cinchona tree is anyway, has an effect on the central nervous system. So yeah, but they're just taking away the symptom, but they're not really doing anything. So that was the thought behind it.
So you're blunting the heart speeding up because
Like,
you're
oh, heart's going
feverish and
so
fighting
fast.
infection.
Let's
So you want to
slow it
blunt
down.
the response to the sepsis, to the
Yeah,
infection.
exactly.
Make sure you're
something.
I mean, it did something, but I mean, if you take enough digitalis, you will stop the heart, and therefore you won't have a fever anymore. So I guess it could work.
Yeah. So a long background to actually get to what I was going to talk about anyway. That's the medical background. It was a big player at the time, killed up to 80% of people that didn't clear it right away, and accounts for a quarter of the deaths in London in the 1800s. So, woof, is a big one. The English, though, took this slow-moving epidemic and turned it inside out in a sort of mass cultural delusion, which is really kind of fascinating. So they romanticized the illness to a tremendous degree. So Emily Bronte, who we talked about before, the Wuthering Heights author, I'll just sorry about that. Emily Bronte was one
Good day,
example
officer.
of how
I love your book, by the way.
she was how. So her dying of consumption was romanticized by the whole literary set. She's kind of the Amy Winehouse of books. She only ever published the one. It was super famous, and her career was cut short. And I know Amy Winehouse had more than one album, but everyone thinks she could have had a longer
It's a
career.
lazy
right?
metaphor, people. Lazy metaphor.
Lazy, come on. I thought it was pretty good. I was trying to make
current.
it relevant for the younger folks.
No, the kids love it.
The kids, exactly. It's for the kids.
Yeah, she was like the Post Malone of the Amy Winehouse
Era.
era.
Keats, one of the most famous so-called romantic poets at the beginning of the 18th century, died of TB.
I bet you put so-called there because you don't think he's a poet.
No, because I don't think the romantic movement was really that romantic. He wrote odes
Poetry's
to
overrated.
melancholy and the transience of life. It's really great.
So did I in 6th grade.
Yeah, exactly.
No, you just did that weird S shape. You just drew that over and over again.
Yeah, because that's how I
What's that
express my
called?
feelings.
Yeah. Max with his famous love of poetry. So
Mhm.
Byron, another famous poet and a contemporary of Keats, who wrote the She Walks in Beauty poem that is somewhat famous, pillar of English major life, noted at one point, quote, "How pale I look. I should like, I think, to die of consumption, because then the women would all say, see that poor Byron, how interesting he looks in dying," end quote. Must have been
Now
really
he would
fun
just
guy.
now he would just put gauges in his ears and wear a beanie and have a mustache, Max.
I think I was friends with that guy in high school.
Yeah, we all were.
Hmm.
Percy Shelley wrote to Keats at once about this and basically said, "Wow, you look really great. TB really is wears artistic types well, doesn't it?" So yeah, there's all this stuff about just how kind of romantic the disease was, which again, I don't think that's quite accurate. They took the idea that TB was related to constitution and sort of ran with that and applied it to standards of behavior and beauty in the upper classes. So it was sort of assumed that it was a problem among the poor, which it was obviously, but then to the extent that people died of TB among the upper classes, they would relate the infection to the ways people were like the poor. So they would say, well, it's the foul air or living in the city when you could live in the country. And a lot of these written opinions said women were more vulnerable than men because they were indolent and inactive. So they would kind of just run with that stereotype.
Truer words have never been written.
Physicians and others with opinions on TB would link lifestyle issues to TB with absolute abandon. The waltz came out around this time when it was popular, so they said, "Oh, well, that's a cause of TB or overexerting yourself."
I'm gonna argue they have a point, because if you're
And that's why
dancing
I didn't
face to
wanna-
face with somebody coughing blood
Yeah, right.
at them,
Yeah.
it probably is a way to get it.
Yeah,
I mean, I
that's
don't think
probably
it's
true.
the nature of the dance, other than just being near another person.
Well, and then people would spin around coughing, so they just made these vortices.
A TB vortex.
Yeah.
I don't like poetry, and I don't like dancing. And I'm trying to figure out which one I don't like more. Now I have good reason.
Yeah, you got it. Well, maybe by the end of the episode, you'll know.
Hmm.
As anatomists struggled to figure out what the nervous system did or how it worked, which because they found the nerves, but they didn't really understand what they did, there was this whole concept of sensibility, like an overactive nervous system, which was the cause of disease. And they associated worry that a more refined life was leading to excitation of the nervous system, which then led to a whole host of diseases with TB among them. So George Chine or Chiney, I don't know. Cheney. Kiney?
Four
I don't know.
pronunciations are possible.
CHYNE.
CHYNE, everybody.
You decide, listener.
It's probably not that at all.
No.
It's probably not. An English physician at the beginning of the Victorian era, he used this concept to turn health on its head and describe what he called, quote, the English malady. Essentially, the price of England's class dominance and wealth was a more excitable nervous system. That's the sensibility. So the reason the English were so successful was the same reason they got sick. So like, we're so awesome, we're nervous about it, so we get sick.
So hold on here. So they're blaming the excitable nervous system for TB, but then they're also giving women grief for being indolent and inactive. That would be like a less excited nervous system.
No,
But they
Oh,
got
you're right.
hysterical, Max. They were hysterical and emotional.
I'm just saying, I feel like they're on shaky ground as far as the logic of this goes.
Well,
There's a
yeah.
lot of shaky ground.
This whole time period is just shaky ground.
But then
Constant-
yeah.
Intellectual earthquaking.
Yep.
Mhm.
So they use that to say if you were rich and sick, then you got sick because of how awesome you were. Like, I don't know, man. It's a crazy mass delusion.
I'm so excitable.
Yeah, very excitable, but you're excitable because you have class dominance and wealth. And if
Well,
you weren't excitable, you wouldn't have that.
So they're like
Elon
Batman.
Musk is worried about his health now.
So it's Batman. He's excitable and taking advantage of his class, but also
Yeah. Well, he's not that healthy.
Susceptible to TB.
spends a lot of time in the city.
Bat
at night.
N95.
Yeah.
I am TB.
No, it would be the Batspirator.
Bat sprayer.
So in this setting, being sick with TB.
Hyperbaric chamber.
Oh, jeez. Being sick with TB, previously romanticized and then linked to a sign of superior nervous system, became fashionable. The fact that your pulse raced, you got pale and lightheaded, you could barely deal with the slightest exertion was in fact not malnutrition and low oxygen from advancing bacterial illness, but a sign that your nervous system was highly advanced and proof of your high status. So that's kind of how they wrote about it.
They've done this over time, though. Like, again, in previous other cultures, if you were fat, that was considered like something that you wanted to attain.
Yeah.
Because that meant that you had high status.
Yeah. Well, and we do it today all the time as well, right? I mean, there's different ways we denote status. And it's been fashionable to be sick more recently. Didn't
Are
Mike
you
last
saying
time
this because you currently have a head cold?
Yeah.
No, I think we talked about the last time we recorded this, we talked about the example of heroin chic, which is, it's obviously a terrible pandemic that's killing a bunch of people. And yet we sort of romanticize this wave thin type of fashion trend.
It was the 1990s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the 90s were.
We
they
totally
were
moved
dark
A
past
lot
all
like
that.
Victorian England, yeah.
1990s
like,
were definitely very analogous.
Everybody was sad all the time. We were trying to get in touch with our emotions, but we didn't really know how.
We were so emo. It was great.
Before emo was even a thing, because once we kind of got it out of our system, then the emo kids came in. Like, what about us?
There was kind of like a bad poetry explosion in like the early 2000s from.
Well,
Yeah,
in
right.
the 90s, isn't that when like slam poetry came out? And
Yes.
Well, I mean, that's kind of, I think, 90s to 2000s. So
yeah,
But Max, is there good
All that-
poetry?
what's
yeah,
that?
is
Is
slam
there
poetry.
good poetry?
There's like two good poets ever in history, and then the rest are just no.
Fair.
Who are the two poets?
Macho Man Randy Savage and Scott Steiner.
Okay.
One's a wrestler. Who's the other one?
Scott Steiner's also a wrestler. You should
Oh.
watch his math promo. That is poetry.
Math?
Math promo. It's probably some of the
Like
greatest poetry ever written.
arithmetic?
You could call it that.
No, yeah.
I'll show it
math.
to you afterwards. Math.
I don't want to
like,
watch it. I refuse. I literally am
gotta-
going to close my eyes.
You're gonna get kicked off the show if you don't watch it. You can close your eyes. You can hear
And I'm
it.
going to
It's still
close my ear.
magical.
I'm going to take my headphones off.
So, fashion and beauty trends grew out of the above cultural underpinnings at the end of the 19th century, and the medical community happily took part in this discussion. The London Medical and Surgical Journal in 1833 said, in contrast to, quote, uglier illness, this is a quote, consumption, neither effacing the lines of personal beauty nor damaging the intellectual functions, tends to exalt the moral habits and exalt the amiable qualities of a patient, end quote. So
What did that journal have a list of which illnesses like made people more attractive? And I'm betting cholera wasn't on that list.
No, I don't think so. Cholera, was way too much pooping.
Pustular acne?
Yeah. Keep
Leprosy
in mind,
high
so
school.
they're describing a progressive bacterial illness that causes cheese-like lumps of dead white blood cells and bacteria throughout the body, leads to incessant coughing of blood and almost constant diarrhea until one dies of pneumonia. That was what they thought exalted people.
It's a good spin.
No, but they
Good
looked
spin.
they looked hot and they
That's right.
could still communicate with people.
Yeah.
I mean,
It sounds like you don't
tuberculosis
get
had one of the best
encephalopathic.
PR departments ever.
Yeah, it definitely
I'm gonna roll
does.
this out, boys.
And
Well,
That's I don't know. I mean, it's either I don't know if it's chicken or the egg, but fashion trends of the time focused on thinness and paleness as beauty standards, which TB causes. So he had corsets were used along with lots of other dress accessories to emphasize a slim waist, and makeup trends would include rosy cheeks and pale skin. They talked about projecting clavicles, which are your collarbone, and wing-like scapula, which is the shoulder bone, were considered attractive. Both of them visible as a consequence of severe muscle wasting. So that's a cachexia. So if you have severe malnutrition, those areas become more prominent. Writers were aware that TB was one of the causes emphasizing standards of beauty. So a beauty essayist wrote that in the last stage of consumption, a lady may exhibit the roses and lilies of youth and health and be admired for her complexion the day she is to be buried.
Jeez.
And it even got to the point that medical texts would equate beauty with vulnerability to TB. So the same way we think about high blood pressure as a risk for heart disease, it was basically telling doctors, hey, if your patient's hot, they are at risk of getting TB.
But what did
Which
they
is-
prescribe to limit their patient's beauty? Like, what's the opposite of a cucumber face mask?
Like wear a mask. Then it won't
Elbow
see
drop
you.
to the
I don't
face.
know. Break your nose. I don't know, man.
Unprettier?
I don't know. I don't. Yeah. the mutton suet is what they prescribed, regardless. Clothing trends throughout the 1800s were both pushed by this beauty standard and were part of the debate over causes, because we all know clothing causes tuberculosis. So through the 1800s, dresses exposed more skin, especially in the back, which was related to the scapula fashion. So you wanted to show off your shoulder blades. But this was then attacked by many physicians as dangerous, because we all know you catch cold when you go outside without suitable clothing. You do not.
Well, I actually looked it up because I was curious. I was like, just going outside and being cold, does that make you more susceptible to illness? And apparently there is some research that it does, because the mucous membranes, being in a cold environment, are less able to fend off viral intrusion, and viruses can replicate so much easier in a colder temperature. And that's why body raises the temperature to a fever. It helps you fight the virus. So I thought this was a myth, but
it's
apparently
actually not a myth.
Yeah.
Okay, well, so I guess they were right. They were right.
A deep V-neck, Mike. You're probably going to get tuberculosis.
Beware.
I'm a crew neck all day long.
Mike's got an extended turtleneck on right now.
You can't see your clavicles. You can't see your clavicles or your shoulder blades, Mike.
Early 2000s, I was one of those guys. I liked those. You remember those sweaters that had the turtleneck? It wasn't a turtleneck, but it was like a turtleneck sweater. They were usually
yeah. A mock neck or whatever, where it just went up, but it didn't have the full. Mm-hmm. There's so much discussion of wing-like shoulder blades in Victorian writing, either in favor or disapproval. Women also around that time stopped using flannel underwear, which some physicians thought was very dangerous. There's a whole bunch of writing about that.
Up here in Wisconsin, we don't see a lot of TB because everybody's got flannel underwear.
That's right. That's why we're so safe. Lastly, corsets, which emphasize thin waists, were a huge point of debate, as they restricted both activity, which you're supposed to be active in, like breathing. So, I think it's probably a great idea for me to just continue to go on about fashion trends. But
hey, look, somebody who wore spiky necklaces and bracelets and had fluorescent green hair, wallet chains, and jinkos at various points through high school into early college.
Nice.
I do feel qualified to comment on fashion and beauty trends.
There is a phenomenon as well during this time called tight lacing, which was prominent in the use of corsets, but not universal. It looks, but common. It's condemned by many physicians as causative. So you essentially have a corset, but then somebody helped pull it so tight that you achieved a more realistic.
They still do this at the Renaissance Festival.
Yeah, tight lace.
If you go buy a corset, they'll
tight lace you.
Well,
can you breathe?
Well, here's how the gimmick works. You go there. I went there. We go every year, my wife and I, because we're nerds. And many years ago, we were with some friends. I had a couple of horns of ale and was enjoying a jolly afternoon.
Was it just like regular beer? Is it just like
yeah? But I have a horn. I have a 2-liter horn that you just pour it in. Is that no? I'll have mead there, but. Yeah, you just So fill up the horn. A couple horns go down. You're enjoying the warm summer day at the Renaissance Festival, and you're like, "Where'd my wife go?" And she went to go check out the corset shop, and they just threw her in a corset, laced it up, and she wanders out. She's like, "What do you think?" And we bought that corset because everybody looks pretty amazing in a corset.
Did they tie it with their foot? You know how you see it in the movies, they put the foot on the back and
I mean, you can. There's a billion different loops in it, so it can be cinched pretty tight.
Tightly, yeah.
It's a fairly easy sales strategy too, especially if if the other part of that relationship is well into their cups.
Yeah, fair enough. They did also around this time invent metal eyelets.
Sounds like she was well into her cups.
Oh, jeez.
She listens to the show. She'll appreciate that.
The metal eyelets allowed them to pull it tighter without tearing the corset, so they could do more than they used to be able to. Long trains on dresses were blamed for kicking up dust that affected the lungs. So women would walk down the dirt streets of London and they'd make dust because the trains were long. So that was blamed. This only intensified when Robert Koch isolated and identified the bacterium in the 1880s as the cause, at which point other physicians said, well, the skirts must increase passage of the bacterium. So even when they knew it was a bacterium, they still sort of persisted with some of these theories.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's fair to say that men suffered equally from fashion trends, as we all know is true. When the voluminous beards of the late Victorian era were attacked for the number of bacteria they held, So Edwin Bowers, the doctor who pioneered reflexology, proving that even a blind squirrel finds a nut now and then, when he said, there is no way of knowing the number of bacteria, noxious germs that may lurk in the Amazonian jungles of a well-whiskered face. But their number must be legion, blaming whiskers for tuberculosis and whooping cough and diphtheria and measles and scarlet fever. So, but
As a mustache gentleman, I feel attacked.
Yeah, well, they've done the study, right? They've tested beards, and there's lots of bacteria in them. There's bacteria everywhere, people. All those studies are a gimmick.
I'm just
I eat
picturing
a lot of my mustache on a daily basis.
I'm just picturing Robert Koch sitting in a room with Max and just kind of giving him a side eye. It's like
look at
what's
all
this
those
guy bringing into his room?
germs. This actually led to a clean-shaven fashion trend, especially among doctors, which is sad because there are literally no beards like late 19th century beards. Those things are gorgeous. So
They are. They really are.
at the end of the day, tuberculosis gradually declined in England. I did not see a good theory as to exactly why. It's probably a combination of sanitation. And if it was an epidemic, then epidemics naturally rise and fall. So it did spread through the U.S. as well a bit later. And we probably could do a couple more episodes with regards to how it played into history. But I like to end on an up note and just keep in mind that TB is deadlier than ever. Most cases at this point occur in developing nations in Africa and Asia, with a strong link to HIV, which makes the infection much worse. And because it's so difficult to treat, we're up to about 50,000 cases a year of something called XDR TB, which is the X Games version of multi-drug resistant TB.
Because there's an X there?
Yeah. The worst strains are resistant to multiple antibiotics and really, really hard to treat. We only have one good vaccine, and it has a ton of side effects, so it's only used right now in children and people with latent disease, I believe. You got to get those children with the side effects. Good times ahead with this still incredibly active disease, but at least we can all die beautiful.
Aaron, can I tell you something?
Yeah.
You're really bad at positive notes. Really bad.
I feel like that was positive-ish.
Yeah.
It was mostly positive.
I don't know that
It's still with us, man.
Oh, well, given that being the fact, that just means that we even more so appreciate everyone listening, and that we'd love to hear from all of you out there. So if you'd like to send us a message or provide feedback, we can be reached through our website, www.poorhistorianspod.com, and there you will find links to our social media sites. We take emails at poorhistorianspod@gmail.com and work to respond to all of our posts on the various social media accounts. If you have a medical history question you'd like to send us to try to stump Mike, and what are we, 0-4 now, or 0-5? He's not off to a good start, so that means if you send us a question to ask him and you stump him, you will get your own eponym named after you.
We're going to switch it around pretty
Camille's
soon. If
Clutch.
you ask a question that he answers correctly, that's when you get your eponym.
That's
yeah, might have to.
That's less fun. If you have time, please go and leave us a five-star review on iTunes or whichever platform you choose. And if you're in a pinch and are in a public bathroom and you need your neighbor to spare a square, just tap your foot to the Poor Historians podcast theme song, and they'll probably get the hint. Is a Seinfeld reference considered old-fashioned, Mike, that you wrote here?
I guess, yeah. It's probably 35 years old
It's
now.
been 30 years.
I don't want to talk about it. Until next time, the Poor Historians are sending out AMA.
Bye. That certainly makes a fair bit of sense. Being there's no reasonable explanation as to why anyone be here in old Bonnie. Okay. That certainly makes a fair bit of sense.
Welcome, everyone. This is Poor Historians, the podcast delving into the archives of medical history. As three emergency musicians. I don't know why. As three emergency physicians,
we need
we
a
will
tune.
explore tune stat.
The new Jurassic Park movie was on some streaming service. So like I clicked on it.
That
Had some
movie's
issues
bad.
with buffering. Yeah. So like even the CGI didn't look good.
No, I know it's just a bad movie.
But the dinosaur and I can't recall the name now again, it's the one with the bald head, was in the movie. And I was like, oh my God.
Isn't it like
Oh my God, there it
Pachia
is.
something-osaurus?
Cephalosporus.
Cephalosporus? Cephalosaurus. Yes, I like that. Indeed.
Pachycephalosaurus, right? Isn't it
Pachycephalosaurus. Cephalo meaning head. What's pachy mean? punch with head?
Pachycephalosaurus, yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, there he is.
I don't
I
know.
mean, it wasn't written. Remember, I had that book of dinosaurs, and we were talking about dinosaurs, and I knew a lot about dinosaurs because I liked dinosaurs back in the day.
Yeah.
Didn't have
at
social
us.
media, so I had this stupid book that I would look at every night before I went to bed. And
Yeah.
we kind of had a segue to sharks.
And that was like, what, 2010?
Yeah. But I remembered him having two like Fonzie thumbs for claws, but he didn't in the movie. I wrote a letter to the
Did you?
Who's got two thumbs and a thick skull? This guy.
This guy.
Director. I was upset about the
Yeah,
inaccuracy.
director of Jurassic Park Dominion.
It's something so pedantic. I
That
would
was
do
what
it.
bothered me the most. The Pachycephalosaurus didn't have thumbs.
Yeah.
Nothing else about the movie bothered
I
me.
feel that
Mhm.
the Pachycephalosaurus never gets its due, and this one time you mishandled it.
Here's the thing, too, in the movie. All right, so the dinosaurs live in this world now. They just live in the world. And there's still a fishing boat, or
Like,
like
they like go to work and
they're crabbing, and then
sell
this
insurance and stuff?
gigantic dinosaur eats the boat. And they're like, whoa, why did that happen? Like, because these things exist. Don't go in the water. Like, there's like a Tyrannosaurus messing around with somebody at a campsite. It's like, don't go outside until you take care of this problem.
That's why I don't go camping.
Yeah, that would be scary. That would be a big problem. There were dinosaurs that lived
Right?
here.
I mean, we're scared enough of spiders, for crying out loud.
Yeah. There's a reason I'm not excited about going to visit rainforests. I'm like,
Right?
I'll go to...
Oh,
Is it the
that's the only
botflies?
thing? Yeah.
No, it's
Yeah.
not
Bot
the only
flies is
thing.
a legit terror, like fear
They're
of mine.
awful. Wait,
Mhm.
yeah. And
The
the Amazon
fly,
has
you know.
fish that swim up your penis. I mean, come on. No, I don't want that. I don't want that
Yeah,
to
well.
happen to me. That's if the piranhas don't get you, although they don't really, attack
Here's
humans.
the thing.
Yeah,
Everybody always talks about these exotic species in these other locales, but here in the northern Midwest, we have geese, and they are mean. They're just as mean.
Yeah,
Geese
as
are
but
the
again-
scary as hell.
But here's the thing. It's wide
They're
open.
aggressive.
Yeah, you could see the goose, and you know the goose isn't going to injure you. They're
They
just
go,
going to...
Yeah,
you're
right.
gonna-
They can break
What?
arms.
They will
They can
injure
break
you,
arms.
man.
Can they
They
really?
are
Yeah.
mean.
Yeah,
yeah.
they
You
hit
fall
you with their
over running?
wings.
And they'll goose bite you. They're like, just
Yeah.
I thought that was for goose bump.
18 people die in the state every year from geese attacks.
No, because they fall over
lie.
probably. Because they try
That's
to
a
run
lie.
away and their pants fall down and then they fall over and hit their head.
many people
because
die
of the goose.
from goose injuries. That is 18.
The number's
people.
probably not zero.
There are no documented cases of a human dying
Oh.
from a goose attack.
There you go, Max.
That's from Quora, though,
Fact
which is
checking.
highly questionable.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
okay. There, I don't. Yeah, no, I don't
That's
accept
mostly
that.
user based,
highly
right?
questionable. Yeah, it's just people